Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today we are doing a deep dive into what I can only describe as a really striking piece of source material.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly heavy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We are looking at a specific message delivered by Charles Spurgeon. This is from September 18, 2025, and it's titled, A Holy and Homely Resolve.
Which is such a great title.
Right, and the whole text really hinges on just one single verse, which is Psalm 101, verse 2.
Yeah, just one verse.
But, to really catch the sheer force of what is happening here, you have to look at the immediate context.
You really do.
Because think about the expectation you bring to the whole concept of worship. Like if I say worship, what do you think of?
Usually, volume,
Yeah.
a crowd.
Yes, we anticipate volume. We picture this massive stadium concert scenario, right? Bright lights, a roaring crowd, the sheer sonic force of thousands of voices just singing together in absolute unison.
Yeah, that corporate public gathering, which is a glorious reality.
It is, and that is the exact environment of Psalm 100.
Right, the old 100.
Yeah, it's famous across the globe. It literally commands us to make a joyful noise, to enter the gates with thanksgiving, to sing loudly.
But then you turn the page.
Right. You turn to the very next song, Psalm 101, and it shifts with this sudden, almost jarring abruptness.
It's like a completely different world.
It really is. You step out of the stadium, and the roaring music just stops. You walk through your own front door, and suddenly you are looking at a landscape of dirty dishes, tired family members, and just endless mundane tasks.
Yeah, the environment is quiet, it's ordinary, and it is entirely stripped of glamour.
Completely. And the sequence of those two chapters, placed right next to each other, reveals a massive, weighty truth.
Which is what?
That the highest form of praise is actually purity. And the sweetest music a human being can produce for God is a holy life lived out behind closed doors.
Wow, yeah, that abrupt transition from the public square to the private living room. It really grounds high theology in the grit of daily reality.
It really does.
And, to grasp the gravity of Psalm 101, we have to look at the specific author and the precise moment in history when he penned these words.
Right, because context is everything.
Exactly. Spot on. David wrote this at the precise moment he assumed regal authority over the United Nation of Israel.
Which was not a quick process for him.
No, not at all. Consider the timeline here, because this was definitely not an overnight success story. David had been anointed 3 separate times.
3 times?
Yeah. First, as a young, totally forgotten shepherd boy in the quiet obscurity of his father Jesse's house.
Right. Just a kid among the sheep.
Yeah. And then second, years later at Hebron, where he was recognized as king, but, only over the house of Judah.
So it was a fraction of the kingdom.
Right. And finally, after another really long, bloody season of civil war, he was anointed at Hebron over the entire United Nation.
So, visualize the psychological pressure cooker of this specific moment for him.
Oh, it must have been intense.
After decades of waiting, hiding in caves, literally dodging spears, and fighting relentless battles, the reins of government are finally firmly in his hands.
The crown is finally on his head.
Yeah. He possesses absolute authority. And what is his first deliberate action?
He sits down to draft a calculated resolution regarding how he will manage his own private behavior.
Which is just wild to me. The phrasing of that resolution demands our full attention. He states, I will behave myself wisely in a perfect way.
Yeah, and Spurgeon points out what David specifically rejects in this moment.
Right, what he doesn't say.
Yeah, he does not say he will behave grandly, like mimicking the stately, opulent sultans or shahs of the surrounding nations.
No grand parades.
No, he doesn't plan a magnificent theatrical display of majesty designed to, awe the peasantry and terrify his rivals.
And he also explicitly rejects the pursuit of unbridled pleasure.
Yeah, he doesn't say he's going to have a merry time, indulging every fleshly desire, hoarding horses, building a fleet of chariots.
Or gathering singing men and singing women to entertain his every whim.
Right. He rejects empty conceit, and he rejects luxury. He chooses discreet, wise conduct.
But, I want to challenge this initial posture for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if you look at human psychology, right, when a person finally reaches a massive milestone after years of intense suffering and deprivation, which is precisely what David endured in the wilderness.
Oh, definitely.
The most natural human reaction is a desire to enjoy the spoils.
Of course it is.
You secure the massive promotion, you get the corner office, you secure the bag, and you just want to exhale and enjoy the comfort you earned.
Yeah, you feel like you deserve it.
Right. So why is David's immediate, almost severe pivot to strict self-governance so unusual?
Right. Well, it totally defies our baseline psychological impulses, like you said. Human nature inherently craves vindication and luxury following a season of severe deprivation.
Yeah.
But David's choice to prioritize wisdom over grandeur, it wasn't an exercise in ascetic piety, it was a tactical survival requirement.
Survival requirement.
Yeah, because the sheer danger of a foolish leader cannot be overstated. A foolish king is no ordinary fool.
Why is that?
Because a crown amplifies every single character flaw to a national scale.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And we see this precise dynamic play out in the subsequent generation with the utter disaster brought upon the Jewish nation by Rehoboam.
Okay, yeah, Rehoboam. Let's unpack that.
So Rehoboam inherited a wealthy, stable, united kingdom from his father, Solomon.
He had it all handed to him.
Totally. But unlike David, Rehoboam had no crucible. He was raised in the opulent, shielded environment of a harem.
Right, no suffering, no hiding in caves.
Right. So when he took the throne, he rejected the measured counsel of the elders and chose to act like a grand, untouchable tyrant.
Yeah, promising to rule with scorpions, I think is the phrase.
Yes. And his lack of wisdom fractured the entire nation permanently.
And David understood that dynamic intimately.
He did. He also understood his volatile political reality. The descendants of the previous king, Saul, along with various hostile factions led by men like Shimei, they were tracking his every single move.
They were just lurking in the shadows.
Waiting for him to slip up, waiting for him to show a moment of weakness or corruption or tyrannical arrogance.
Because if David gave himself over to wild parties or arrogant displays of power, he would hand his enemies the specific political ammunition they needed to delegitimize and destroy his reign.
Precisely. Wisdom was his only shield.
And applying this to you, the person listening right now, the parallels are pretty striking.
Yeah, they really are.
Because you might not be stepping into a monarchy in the ancient Near East, but you absolutely have a sphere of influence.
Everyone does.
Whether you are moving into your first apartment and managing your own space, or stepping into a management role at your company, or, starting life afresh after a devastating financial or relational setback.
You are the leader of that specific domain.
Exactly. You face a blank slate. And David's deliberate, calculating choice to establish a baseline of wisdom, rather than chasing conceit or immediate pleasure, it really stands as the ultimate blueprint for taking on new authority.
It does. And Spurgeon applies this text with sweeping universality.
Yeah, he doesn't just leave it for the kings.
Right. This resolution is absolutely not reserved for royalty or heads of state. He applies it directly to the humblest waiting maid trying to honor God in her daily chores.
Wow.
He applies it to the tradesman facing fierce, sometimes underhanded market competition. And he intensely applies it to parents tasked with raising children.
Because the stakes are universal, even if the visible scale of the domain is entirely different.
Yeah, the stakes are the same.
I want to pull an analogy directly from the source material here because I think it makes the concept of absolute ruin so tangible.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Picture a humble fisherman. Right?
Okay.
If that fisherman mismanages his tiny, unassuming little rowboat and it takes on water and sinks with him inside it, the ruin for him is total.
Total ruin.
His loss is just as complete, just as devastating as if the greatest steamship ever built plowed the waters and perished with its wealthy captain.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
A drowning man at the bottom of the ocean does not care whether he fell off a wooden skiff or a luxury ocean liner. The mathematics of the loss are identical.
Right, because total ruin is total ruin.
Yeah.
And your life, regardless of your social grade, your income bracket, your vocation, it holds your entire cargo.
Yes, your whole life is in that boat.
Right. The scope of your daily responsibilities might seem insignificant to the outside world. I mean, the corporate executive might scoff at the stay-at-home parent's daily routine.
Which happens all the time.
It does.
Yeah.
But your domain contains everything you possess. Consider the specific example of parenting mentioned in the text.
Parenting is a great example.
Raising a human being requires a staggering amount of tailored, specific wisdom. Think of a master gardener.
Yeah, okay.
A gardener does not treat every plant in the greenhouse identically.
No, they'd all die.
Right. One specific plant might require dry heat and sandy soil to thrive, while another fragile cutting needs constant moisture and heavy shade.
Yeah.
If the gardener applies a lazy one-size-fits-all approach, they will destroy half the greenhouse.
And parents are dealing with immortal souls.
Yeah, the stakes are way higher than plants.
They need immense wisdom to accurately judge, say, one child's highly sensitive, anxious disposition against another child's defiant, stubborn character.
And they have to adjust their discipline, instruction, and encouragement accordingly.
And the source points out that even a household servant, a nanny, or a babysitter holds massive influence.
Oh, massive. Their negligence, harshness, or even just careless words can warp a child's mind permanently.
Because you cannot afford to mismanage your rowboat since the cargo is irreplaceable.
Right, and that reality leads us directly to a highly stressful tension.
What tension is that?
Well, if the need for wisdom in managing our specific domain is that intense, how do we determine the wise path when we are staring down a tricky, highly complicated situation?
Oh, right. Because life is messy.
Yeah. We constantly face ethical dilemmas where the right choice feels obscured by a thick fog. We look for the smartest angle, the best compromise.
Right. And Spurgeon makes a claim here that cuts straight through that fog. He asserts that the perfect straight way is always the wisest way.
Always.
But human beings are incredibly prone to looking at the path ahead, seeing a patch of sharp flint stones, and deciding they need to veer off the straight road.
Yeah, we hate pain.
They look for a shortcut across what John Bunyan in The Pilgrim's Progress vividly called bypath meadow.
Such a great literary reference.
They think they can just bypass the immediate pain, walk on the soft grass for a little while, and hop back on the main road later when conditions improve.
But I need to push back on this heavily because we have to put this in the context of the real world.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's look at the modern workplace. You are a mid-level manager, you have a mortgage, your kids need health care,
High stakes.
very high, and your boss calls you into the office and strongly hints or outright demands that you alter a quarterly earnings report just a fraction of a percent to make the numbers look slightly better for the shareholders.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Taking the straight road in that moment, refusing to compromise your integrity will likely cost you your job, your income, and potentially your reputation in that industry.
It's terrifying.
And Spurgeon mentions receiving letters daily from people begging for indulgences or theological loopholes for their specific painful dilemmas.
They want an out.
Yeah. How does the inflexible law of God interact with an elastic human conscience when survival is literally on the line?
Well, the source material gives a blunt, uncompromising answer that really offends our modern sensibilities.
And what is it?
Straight ahead. The law of God grants no indulgences.
Zero.
We love to flatter ourselves by imagining that our specific dilemma is uniquely complicated, right? That it requires a highly sophisticated, nuanced, ethical compromise.
We convince ourselves that God surely understands the nuance of our corporate environment.
But Spurgeon argues that even if Prince Bismarck, a man famous across Europe for his far-seeing eye and incredibly shrewd, calculating political maneuvering, if he offered you advice on your specific situation, he could offer nothing wiser than simply doing justice and speaking the truth.
So that completely eliminates the excuse of strategic compromise.
Completely.
But you have to admit the short-term consequences of that truth-telling can be absolutely devastating for a family.
Oh, devastating in the short term, yes. But the implications of the alternative are far more severe.
How so?
Losing all your earthly property, losing your position, and facing temporary financial ruin by doing the right thing is a far better outcome than losing your soul, your peace, and your standing before God to acquire or maintain wealth.
That's a heavy perspective.
And look at the psychological reality of the shortcut. When people relax their integrity just a tiny fraction to please a corrupt boss or secure a lucrative deal, they think they're being incredibly clever.
They think they're mastering the game.
Right. But in reality, they have just placed their neck in a noose. They end up with their nose to the grindstone for the rest of their lives, perpetually trapped by that initial compromise.
Because you can't just lie once.
Exactly. They have to tell a second lie to cover the first and a third to cover the second. Suddenly, they are living in a state of constant low-grade terror, entirely owned by the person who knows their secret.
The boss who forced you to cook the books now owns you.
Yeah, because they can expose you at any time. The straight way might have sharp flintstones that cut your feet to ribbons, but it keeps you out of the swamp where you will inevitably drown.
The short-term pain of honesty prevents the long-term agony of a compromised captive conscience.
It does.
That is a weighty reality to carry into the office on Monday morning.
Absolutely.
Let's look back at David's phrase, because this introduces a massive theological component. He says, "I will behave myself wisely."
I will.
Yeah, the words "I will" demonstrate a muscular, intense determination.
But anyone who has ever tried to break a deeply ingrained bad habit knows that sheer human willpower depletes incredibly fast.
Oh, so fast. Maintaining absolute purity of thought and action for more than 24 hours? Good luck.
Right. This ironclad determination is coupled with a glaring lack of inherent human ability. It absolutely requires external divine grace.
Without grace, the I will is just empty, arrogant boasting.
Yeah.
And Spurgeon offers a severe critique of a character type he labels Mr. Talkative.
Mr. Talkative, I love that name.
It's perfect. This describes the staggering hypocrisy of individuals who loudly glory in the doctrines of free grace, who love to debate high theology, but who live wildly inconsistent, chaotic lives.
Oh, we all know people like that.
Yeah. He points out the tragic absurdity of individuals who seem to debate theology best when they are half drunk at a tavern.
Which is such an image.
Right. He highlights those who loudly proclaim that human works mean nothing regarding salvation, while simultaneously indulging in business lies, lewd jokes, and vicious slander against their neighbors.
It is a form of functional antinomianism that uses theology as a cloak for malice.
That kind of hypocrisy causes incalculable damage to the witness of the church.
It does. Think about it like a fitness analogy.
Okay.
Imagine a guy walking around your city, constantly boasting about having the most elite, exclusive gym membership in the entire state.
Okay, I can picture this guy.
He wears all the branded gear, he carries the expensive electrolyte drinks, and he can quote the exact biomechanics of a deadlift or the intricacies of muscle hypertrophy.
He knows all the terminology.
Every bit of it. But he never actually lifts a single weight. He never breaks a sweat. Meanwhile, his physical health is completely falling apart.
His muscles are atrophying.
Yeah, and everyone looking at him thinks, if that is what your elite gym membership produces, I want absolutely nothing to do with that facility.
That is exactly what the hypocrite does to the concept of grace.
It repels people from the truth.
It really does. True grace comes freely. It is a sovereign, distinguishing gift from heaven that cannot be purchased or earned by any amount of human striving.
But when that grace actually takes root in the human heart, it alters the individual's baseline character.
Yes. The source quotes the famous preacher Rowland Hill on this.
Oh, the quote about the pets.
Yeah. N.T. Hill asserted that a person's religion is highly questionable if their cat and dog are not the better for it.
Which sounds funny at first, but why the pets?
Because animals only know how you treat them when you are entirely unobserved and unconstrained by social norms.
Wow, that's incredibly convicting.
Right. If the grace of God has touched your soul, it destroys the tyranny of your ego.
It makes a master gentler and more reasonable to his employees, realizing he also has a master in heaven.
It makes the servant diligent and honest.
It makes a tradesman scrupulous in his billing, refusing to overcharge even when he knows he could get away with it.
And it makes a workman less of an eye servant, which is a biblical concept referring to someone who only works hard when the supervisor's eyes are actively watching them.
True grace alters the invisible fabric of your daily interactions.
So David makes this ironclad resolution to walk in this grace-empowered wisdom. He sets the standard.
Yes.
But then, right in the middle of his grand, confident proclamation, he inserts a sudden, almost desperate ejaculatory prayer.
He cries out, "Oh, when wilt thou come unto me?"
Yeah, and this feels completely out of place.
It does. Why break the train of thought? Doesn't stopping to pray disrupt the momentum of such a strong, commanding resolution?
On the surface, it appears to be a disruption of his workflow.
Right.
But the source material provides vivid physical analogies to prove the precise opposite.
Like what?
Well, the text notes that kneeling never spoils silk stockings.
That's a good one.
Right. A scribe who halts his writing to mend and sharpen his quill pen is not losing time.
He's making the writing better.
Yeah. And a farmer mowing a massive field who pauses to wet and sharpen his scythe is not delaying the harvest.
Because if you think of the physics of that work, you can hack away at tall grass with a dull blade for hours,
Yeah, expending massive amounts of kinetic energy.
exhausting your muscles and achieving a terrible jagged cut.
Whoa.
Or you can stop, pull out the whetstone, sharpen the blade, and slice through the field with minimal effort.
In both cases, the worker is gaining the facility to execute the task properly. Prayer does not interrupt the work of holiness. It sharpens the instrument assigned to do the work.
I love that image. We spend so much time hacking at our problems with dull spiritual blades, wondering why we are exhausted and seeing no progress.
So this sudden prayer from David carries a specific twofold meaning.
Let's break those down. What's the first one?
First, it is a desperate cry for immediate assistance. David is essentially saying, I want to be wise, I know the standard of purity I need to maintain, but I cannot act until you instruct me and empower me.
My sheer willpower is entirely insufficient for this task.
Right. It is a yearning for fellowship. The text explicitly notes that communion is the mother of holiness.
You cannot reflect the character of God if you spend absolutely zero time lingering in the presence of God.
That's spot on. And the second meaning is a cry of awe and accountability.
Accountability?
Yes, it is the trembling realization that the master is coming to ask for a strict account of the stewardship.
Oh, wow.
It is the recognition that we do not own our lives, our time, or our influence. We are merely managing them. Well, we're just managing them for the true owner, and an audit is imminent.
That concept of a divine audit brings up a staggering historical reference from the text.
Yes, the story of George Fox.
Yeah, the early Quaker leader. As he lay on his deathbed, his final words to those gathered around him were, I am clear, I am clear.
I am clear.
He was drawing on the biblical concept of the watchman on the wall. He meant that he had discharged his duty to preach the truth so faithfully and lived so consistently that he was clear of the blood of all men.
He held nothing back out of cowardice or laziness.
So apply that standard to your own life. If God asked for your account today, could you look at your spheres of influence and say, you are clear?
That's a terrifying question.
Are you clear regarding the souls of your children? Are you clear regarding the people who work under your management? Are you clear regarding the coworkers you see every single day?
Or have you taken your influence, wrapped it in a rusty napkin, and buried it in the dirt because you were too afraid of social awkwardness or too lazy to invest it?
It is a terrifying standard when you force yourself to genuinely meditate on it.
And that reality of total accountability leads directly to the ultimate proving ground of a person's faith.
Home.
Yes. David narrows his focus all the way down from the vast kingdom of Israel, past the courts, past the public square, directly into his own living room.
He states, I will walk within my house with a perfect heart.
The text references the prophet Elisha here. When Elisha faced a city with a poisoned water supply, he healed the foul, deadly currents by throwing salt directly into the springs.
He didn't try to filter the water miles downstream.
Right, he went to the source. The heart must be put right first, because the home is where the heart is most nakedly visible.
But I want to play devil's advocate here, because the modern therapeutic mindset pushes back violently against this concept.
Okay, lay it on me.
Outside in the world, at the corporate office or in public social settings, we have to keep our guard up.
Yeah, we all do it.
We have to maintain a professional facade, carefully watch our words, monitor our tone, and act a certain way simply to survive the friction of society.
So the home should be a break from that.
Right. Isn't our home the one designated safe harbor where we should be allowed to just let our hair down, stop trying to be on all the time, and just be our raw selves without constant, exhausting self-censorship?
Well, the source material entirely flips that modern assumption on its head.
How so?
It argues that precisely because you are untrammeled at home, because you are entirely free from the observation, the peer pressure, and the restraint of society, your boss or your fellow church members, your home life reveals who you truly are at your core.
Well, that makes sense, because public behavior is heavily regulated by a desperate desire for reputation and social preservation.
Yes, private behavior is regulated only by your actual character.
Wow.
If a person acts like a gracious, patient saint out in the public square, but turns into a bitter, tyrannical, short-tempered devil the moment they walk through their own front door and close it behind them, their public religion is base, worthless, and entirely mischievous.
The home is not a place to take a vacation from holiness.
Not at all. It is the primary laboratory where the authenticity of your holiness is tested and proven.
And the specific anecdotes Spurgeon uses to illustrate these heartless, hypocritical homes are chilling.
Very much so.
He describes visiting a home and the host giving him a greeting like a dead fish hand drop.
A dead fish handshake.
Just totally cold, lifeless, and devoid of any genuine warmth, joy, or hospitality.
He describes a husband who expects his own wife to knock on the room door before entering.
Treating her like a principal servant.
Yeah, and demanding rigid compliance rather than fostering any kind of intimacy or partnership.
And perhaps the saddest, most brutal example is a father who only valued his recently deceased son for the physical labor and financial help the boy provided to the family business.
Yeah, there was no genuine grief for the loss of an immortal soul, just raw frustration over a lost financial asset.
Those examples paint a grim, suffocating picture of a house operating entirely without a heart.
They do. And the text also mentions the grad grindy woman.
The grad grindy woman.
Yeah, it's a brilliant literary reference to Thomas Gradgrind from Charles Dickens' novel Hard Times.
Oh, okay.
Gradgrind is a character obsessed entirely with cold, hard facts, statistics, and utter utility.
He's the one who raises his kids, Louisa and Tom, but basically crushing their imaginations, right?
Yes, treating them like data points. A grad-grindy parent acts with zero affection, treating their family members like literal cogs and machine wheels in a factory that just need occasional oiling to keep the production line running.
There is no warmth, no grace, no joy, just a rigid schedule and relentless demands for compliance. It creates a completely desolate environment.
And the reason this private internal atmosphere matters so immensely is what the text refers to as the imitation factor.
Let's talk about the imitation factor.
Think about the dynamics of hypocrisy. If you are a hypocrite in public, other adults might spot the inconsistency.
Right. They have the cognitive defense mechanisms and the critical thinking skills to analyze your behavior, realize the gap between your words and your actions, and simply dismiss you.
They say, that guy is a fake, and they move on.
But little Master Johnny and little Polly, sitting on the living room rug, building with blocks, cannot criticize you.
No, they don't have the defense mechanisms to analyze your hypocrisy. They simply absorb and imitate it.
To young children, their parents are essentially functioning as little gods.
The children shape their entire worldview, their baseline concept of love, their understanding of justice, and their their basic understanding of who God is, based entirely on what they see you doing in the unscripted privacy of your home.
That is the heaviest burden of parental leadership.
It really is. And the tragedy of wasted influence is a central recurring theme here.
The text shares a heartbreaking story about a poor widow who earned her living by washing clothes.
Yes, it is a story that forces us to look past our immediate struggles and consider the long-term eternal consequences of our private priorities.
Let's examine that story, because it lands with such emotional force. This widow worked with intense, grueling effort. She scrubbed clothes by hand day in and day out, likely until her knuckles bled, to feed her 6 children with absolutely no outside help.
Incredible work ethic.
She succeeded in providing the physical bread they needed to survive childhood, but she was converted to faith very late in life.
By the time she found salvation and began to grasp the staggering weight of spiritual realities, her children were already grown.
Yes, established in their habits and entirely unsaved.
And when she finally approached her eldest boy and asked him to go to the house of God with her, his reply was devastating.
He looked at his mother and said, "You never took us when we were little, and you need never expect us to go now."
Oh man, the bitter, crushing regret of that mother is palpable.
She succeeded in keeping them alive physically against incredible odds, but she completely missed the brief closing window of opportunity to influence the immortal souls of those in her household before they grew beyond her reach.
The tragedy is that she won the lesser battle of physical survival, but she lost the greater war.
For everyone listening, that is the stark, unavoidable warning.
It is.
Look at your own life. You can work 80 hours a week. You can provide the nicest house and the safest zip code. You can ensure the pantry is always full with organic food.
You can fully fund the college accounts and pay for the elite travel sports teams.
But if you miss the window to model a holy, grace-filled, authentic life in front of your children, the regret will be massive.
You will have secured their earthly comfort while entirely neglecting their eternal souls.
Zooming out to a macro perspective, the text argues that the holy living of Christian families is the greatest force in the world for true cultural and spiritual change.
Next to the actual preaching of the truth, a household operating with a perfect heart is the primary engine for conquering the world for Christ.
These homes act as literal garrisons.
Yeah, a garrison is a military outpost, a fortress of holy men and women shining light into a dark, hostile territory.
When the home is ordered by grace and wisdom, the impact does not stay confined to the living room. It spills out into the neighborhood, the local schools, the city, and the nation.
So to synthesize everything we have covered in this deep dive,
true praise is not just singing loudly in a crowded stadium. It requires the absolute purity of your daily unseen actions.
the straightforward, honest path is always the wisest path, regardless of the short-term financial devastation or social cost you might incur.
Claiming to possess divine grace means absolutely nothing if it does not produce tangible, practical goodness in your daily vocation and your treatment of others.
And the most rigorous, accurate test of your actual character happens behind the closed doors of your own house in the moments when no one else is watching.
It all comes down to what happens in those quiet, unseen moments.
It does. And I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on as you go about the rest of your week.
Okay.
Since our homes are our private castles, the specific places where we are entirely free from society's gaze and judgment, imagine if a hidden camera were placed in your living room.
Oh, wow.
Not a camera designed to catch your moral failures or police your verbal mistakes, but simply a lens to quietly observe what captures your highest affection, your disposable income, and your free time when no one else is watching.
Yeah.
What would that raw footage reveal about the deity you actually adore?
That is a question that demands a very honest, uncomfortable answer. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. We will catch you next time.